Hello! Okay, so we're just going to cover spray glazing real quick. So for our beginning classes, your instructor will have access to this spray gun. We don't leave it out here because usually what happens is it doesn't get cleaned properly and it rusts and then it dies. But it's always available during class. Just ask them for it. And then we'll go over cleaning procedures in another video. But real quick, so this is going to be our spray gun that we use. It's called an HVLP, which stands for high volume, low pressure. And what's really exciting about it is that the glaze is gravity fed, so we're able to put a lot of glaze on our work pretty fast, because spraying tends to be a little bit of a slow process, and it's difficult to get enough glaze on there to really get a great melt. On this gun, this controls the air, which I'll show you has like a splattering effect. This is where we connect the compressor line, and then these will adjust either the volume of glaze or the shape of the spray. It'll change it from a fan to a point. So over here we have these small sieves, so this screens our glaze. Whenever we're using the spray gun, it's important to use one of these little screens to screen our shop glazes. Maybe some of you have seen, when students are using it, some pieces of bisqueware might fall in there, or chunks of other glaze, etc. And that'll just kind of clog up the gun and just make it a really frustrating process. So we always want to screen our glaze directly into the gun. So we've got our clear glaze, which is one of the maybe more commonly sprayed glazes. Just like any glaze, you want to stir it up, make sure that it's homogenized, and then yeah, that looks great. Not too thick either. That's just perfect. Make sure that's screwed on. This should be screwed on. It doesn't matter the orientation here. Then we want to take this top off. And these will fit perfectly, almost perfectly, just about perfectly in there. And then we can ladle in glaze. And camera, if you want to come in close, you can see what it's starting to take out of there. And that's what we don't want in the spray gun itself. And you guys can probably, if you want to come take a look too. See, all that little junk? We don't want that. Okay. If you're dipping your work, or if you're getting into you really want this stuff to come out extra nice, this is a process that you can do with any of our glazes for dipping, pouring, brushing. Having little bits in the glaze is just an artifact of being in a community studio space. So, as you guys move further along in ceramics, or should you, that's not a bad process to do. Okay, so yep, the glaze comes out. That's great. Good. So this is our spray booth. We've got a light up here, which you turn on, which helps us see the work. We connect the gun here. So this is a quick connect, so we just pull it back and press it in. It's a little bit tricky. And then we also want to make sure to turn our vent on, which is right over here. And it's just right now an on-off switch. And you can hear it turn on. Okay. Let's see. So we've got the sprayer attached. This should pretty much always be on. If it doesn't work, if you don't get air, just go talk to one of your instructors. It may be that we turn the compressor off for some reason. But we have air. So one of the other cool things about this, if you squeeze a little bit, we're only going to get air coming out of here, no glaze. So that's helpful if you have dust on your work, or if you saturate a part of the piece and it's still really wet, you can use that function to dry it out a little more. As I squeeze more, glaze will start to come out, right? And if I squeeze a little less, it's less glaze. So it's really variable. If you come in close camera, you can probably see as it sprays out, it's getting thicker, like that. And if I adjust the air down here, you go from a very fine mist to one that's really splattery. Like this. And it actually starts to splatter on the walls. You guys can't see any of that, can you? All right, that's okay. Okay, so when we're spraying, we want to be sure to do like a consistent up and down. We want to get as much coverage as we can. Note the angle. So if I'm spraying this way, there's going to be a shadow underneath there. So think about how you move your hand. If you notice the glaze isn't really coming out heavily, stop and then start it again. Sometimes there can be a little thick piece of glaze in there that gets a little bit stuck. But this is essentially how we do our spray glazing. And if you're noticing there's no glaze coming out, like of course there is now, sometimes you have to take this out and clean it. Let's get our dot going. So you can see how much glaze it's putting on there. You can see how wet that's getting, right? What you typically want to avoid is when it starts to drip, or as the potter I used to work for, you'd say, "You're getting curtains, no curtains," because you'd see these little drips that look like, curtains. Did you hear you recording this?
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right, I can talk about that. And so, like right now, trying to get lower to get that shoulder that might not have gotten on there. Whenever you think you have enough glaze, you probably have about half as much as you should. Spraying just tends to go slower than our dip and dunk and stuff. So continue to put a little more on there. Look at the texture, right? So we can still see those tiny little lines from the throwing marks, which we might not normally see if we were dipping our glaze or brushing it and getting it a nice coating. If you want a really, really thin glaze application, you can do that, of course, with spraying. For our pots, you guys are probably going to gravitate towards a clear, but we can do this process with all the glazes. We can layer them. I can do it very homogeneously and just spray clear on this area, and then I can spray red over here like it's a, like a graffiti sort of thing. And then the way that those glazes interface could be really interesting. So there aren't a whole lot of rules other than give this back to us, make sure it's totally clean, don't break it. And then lastly, when we are handling our work, because of the way that sprayed glazes go on, this surface can be what you would say marred, so like kind of smudged or something, a little easier than when we dip and pour and brush. So we want to be really careful. A lot of the times it's helpful to kind of do something like this as opposed to just grabbing it like that, because it's, as you can kind of see, it's just a little more powdery, right? But if you put it on there thick enough, that won't matter too much. And of course, make sure that we don't have anything on our foot, right? Anything that's going to stick to the shelf. And we want to clean this up real good.